Welcome to the Kickstart podcast, where we highlight the stories of how professionals kickstarted and navigated their very successful careers. My name is Preston. On this episode, we have the pleasure of hosting someone who has an impressive career from working in different marketing and growth capacities, launching a sports startup years ago, investing into high growth tech companies, before founding Trustworthy, a company that is reimagining how estate management is done. Nat, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey, Preston, thanks for having me.
Likewise. So I guess a fitting way to get started is for those that don't know who you are, and if you want to fill in the gaps from what I've already said before, would you just mind sharing a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Let's see. I'm originally from Wellington in New Zealand, which is kind of at the bottom of the world. But I've been living in San Francisco Bay Area for 20-something years. I did a degree in information systems, and then quickly got my first job at working for the government in New Zealand at the equivalent of the IRS. It's called the Inland Revenue Department in New Zealand, working on mainframe computers and helping the tax system evolve there. And realized pretty quickly that I didn't want to spend my whole career working for government, and quickly joined Oracle Corporation in New Zealand, really with a view not just to working on database and related applications, but to traveling as part of my career and traveling with the company and being able to work and live at the same time and sort of experience other parts of the world in that way, which within about a year or two manifested with me moving to the United States and getting a job at headquarters for Oracle in Redwood Shores in California, and ending up being quite a big chunk of my career at Oracle for about 13 years, and evolving as that company grew from a pretty small company to a pretty large company, and sort of changing a lot of the landscape of enterprise software. A really great adventure with Oracle, and really the first half of my career spent there before deciding that I wanted to do something completely different, that I didn't want to spend the next 13 or 15 or 20 years at Oracle. Not that that would have been a bad choice. I just wanted to do something different. And it ended up doing things really the opposite end of the scale, from a large corporation doing very early stage startups. And have now spent about the same amount of time that I spent at Oracle doing a series of early stage startups. Both sort of really interesting, unique, different kinds of experiences that I'm happy. I'm really happy I made that decision to try something new and take a different path.
Thank you for that high level. I think what was interesting is that you were able to go through the whole kind of scaling experience at Oracle. I think a lot of people right now, especially if you're listening, you hear the word and name Oracle, you are automatically assume it's this giant kind of just player in the tech world. And it's very hard to kind of think of companies like Oracle or Microsoft or Google as like a small startup or a fast growth one once upon a time. So I think that's really, really cool. And you've been there for quite some time. So what was the one thing that kind of held you back to stay at Oracle? Was it the fact that like it was growing and changing, and you said you were able to evolve a lot as a professional that kind of kept it new and challenging for you, that you were able to stay for as long as 12, 13 years? I mean, in 2022 now, you talk to any tech professionals, or especially in today's time and climate, 12, 13 years is a lifetime for a lot of people, right? With the average kind of tenure becoming 1 to 3 years at a company. So what kind of really stimulated you at that time to kind of have you to continue to stay?
I think first and foremost, I love the technology. We all sort of take databases for granted today, but at one time they were the cool new technology. Relational databases were a big deal, and they're still a big deal. They're just sort of embedded in everything that we do. Mm-hmm. So I just fundamentally loved, databases and rows and columns and SQL, and being able to query things and sort of manipulate information and retrieve information. So I think that was a big part of my passion, the underlying passion for the technology that was at Oracle. And also probably part of the reason why I eventually left, because Oracle had grown so much over that time and had really become acquisitive in acquiring lots of businesses. And had sort of changed the culture of the company a little bit. So, that was one of the factors that sort of caused me to leave. Like, I realized that the company I was working for was not the company that I joined, and sort of inspired me to go do something again, earlier stage. But the other big factors that were amazing about Oracle were obviously my career grew and my responsibilities grew over time. I was able to travel the world with the company and do events, all over the world in different capacities. That was amazing. I was able to grow teams of people that I loved working with. And then, part of the reason I stayed initially was that Oracle was processing my green card, and that took 4 years. And so the combination of sort of that timing and the different regime changes that happened at marketing and across the organization during my tenure meant that there was always something happening and always new opportunities presenting themselves. So I think that's what's exciting about staying somewhere for a while is things constantly evolve, especially in fast-growing companies.
For someone that came from and hailed all the way from New Zealand, which I think is amazing, what were some of the stark similarities and differences that you experienced working at an American company in America?
Yeah, where to start? Well, learning to pronounce my R's was a big one so that people could understand me. I mean, if you think about the culture of Oracle, probably the opposite of what you think of as the culture of New Zealand. The culture of New Zealand being sort of laid back, very friendly people, and the culture of Oracle being sort of a samurai mentality led, led by Larry Ellison and his passion for, hey, let's see which team will win, and sort of pitting folks against each other to create this environment of kill or be killed. And this Oracle has that reputation for a reason, that you're in this environment where you either perform or you don't last that long. I think it's evolved a little bit since then, obviously, but those are diametrically opposite, right? New Zealand culture and the culture of Oracle. So, it just forces you into the situation of deciding, like, do I want to be here or not? Do I want to be part of this culture or not? And obviously, I figured out a way to make it work. Would I create that culture have we created that culture for our company? Absolutely not. We're a very family-oriented culture. So I guess, lessons learned from working at previous companies about what works best, what we think works best for people.
Maybe find some sort of middle ground that works. Maybe you're still that cheerful, social, nice person on the inside with some samurai attire on the outside. And maybe the combination of both has created into a wonderful leader like yourself.
Yeah, there's a great analogy for this in Tai Chi called steel bar wrapped in cotton wool. That if you practice Tai Chi and other sort of Japanese principles, that like that's how you want to be. And maybe that's a good way to approach it is, look, you want to be sort of soft and resilient, but have a strong core, right? Have strong principles and foundation.
So you had a wonderful career at Oracle, which is, by the time you left, I can imagine it's probably sizable, quite large at that time. And then you had a variety of experiences with smaller companies, whether it's like trying to start your own, whether it's working at some, and even ultimately maybe even investing. So how helpful was it to work at a big company like Oracle before you kind of decided then subsequently to then jump into the smaller startups to further your career? A lot of times in tech, you see people working in big tech or banks trying to break into the startup world, or people who started their career working at small companies who then want to work at larger companies. And I think there's a pro and con to both. There's no right or wrong answer, but I guess in your experience, how has, starting a big chunk of your early career at a large company like Oracle positioned you for success, or taught you maybe good habits that you were able to find success in smaller companies?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason I wanted to leave is because I had sort of created this success structure, typical success structure, that actually made me feel very distanced from the day-to-day work, that I'd become more of an administrator of teams and people, and dealt more with sort of HR issues, and then being involved in the sort of technology and product and marketing on a day-to-day basis. When you're a VP and you have a dozen teams reporting to you, that's your job. You have to, that's your job just changes. And I felt separated from the sort of the work that I loved doing, which was building products, marketing products, telling the story of products and why they existed and why people needed them. So I think working at a large company gives you a tremendous foundation and sort of the basics, and that ability to sort of get exposure to a lot of different things in a very structured kind of way. So I think that was great. But in terms of me making the transition to very early companies, it was almost a showstopper. I interviewed for the head of marketing job at LinkedIn. I mean, they were a pretty early startup in around 2008, as I was transitioning out of Oracle. And the CEO at the time was like, hey, look, I love your background and experience. I just don't know if you can make this transition from, having these teams, 120 people reporting to you, and being this administrator to being hands-on and being a player coach here at this company. And this is a really pivotal, important role for us as we grow. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the one that got away, right? That I didn't get that job. I obviously regret not getting that job. That would have been an incredible outcome personally, but was not able to convince him that I could make that transition. And he just didn't have the confidence. Like, are you going to be, you're going to be, knee deep in the work here? Are you going to be able to go from managing people doing the work to actually doing the work as well as building a team? So obviously landed at another startup that was even earlier than that. And having that very early startup experience, literally working for the first winter in the founder's garage as we were like a 3 or 4 person team and growing, and after raising the first couple of $1 million, and having a complete roller coaster of an experience at that first company, and doing everything, not just doing the role I was hired for, but helping the founder run the company, doing operations, doing business development, doing marketing, help evolve the product, doing fundraising, like pretty much everything you could ask for in an initial startup experience is getting exposed to everything, but also being a complete rookie and not really knowing any of the rules of startups. Made for a kind of chaotic first couple of years at that company, but ended in a great outcome with the sale to VMware, which is also nice as a first time out. Having a positive outcome for everyone in the company. So I think, did any part of my experience at Oracle help with that? Absolutely. Like having the fundamentals of knowing how to do, build products and do marketing for those products and grow the user base of the product and the company were all fundamentally great things.
I don't think you need to beat yourself up too much about LinkedIn not happening that. I think if anyone were to take a gander at your LinkedIn, you did just fine for yourself. So kudos to you. But I did want to add though to that experience. I found it very insightful for me to hear that, because in this day and age, so much of that dialogue is actually happening with a lot of people who are interviewing today. Right? A lot of people coming from the Oracles and trying to break into startups, and then they had that same conversation with the company that they're interviewing for, and they would get this same kind of narrative coming back at them saying, hey, we don't know if like your background aligns with ours. And so now, as a founder again, steering the ship of a growing company like Trustworthy, do you find yourself now as a founder and now as an interviewer a lot more empathetic to those that are coming from bigger companies, trying to work at a small company like yours, whereas maybe another hiring manager at another company would simply just ignore that candidate, right? So I just wanted to kind of ask your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't think it's a big metering factor for us. We tend to we get a lot of people saying, hey, look, I worked at a variety of companies. I'm just coming out of working for a big company. Maybe I'm a few years into my career. And what I realized in working for that company is that I tend to get siloed, right? I tend to get a little constrained in my role and the things that I'm allowed to do and the things that I'm even allowed to learn. And I realized that joining an earlier stage company opens that way up for people, or even people in later stages of their career who have amazing experience, who want to join an earlier company. They're looking for a particular kind of experience. Quite often today, I think there's a conversation around, hey, my company's asking me to go back to work either full-time or part-time and be in the office, and I've evolved in the last couple of years and realized that I don't need that, or I don't enjoy that kind of work as much. And so now I'm starting to look around for companies like Trustworthy that are fully remote and give me more flexibility in the way that I work. So I think there's a really interesting set of conversations, but I don't think we wouldn't look at any sort of background experience at large or small companies as any real meaningful benefit or penalty We just sort of look at like, okay, more like, why do you want to be here? Why do you think this makes sense for you? What are you looking for in your next role? And hopefully some connection to the mission that we're on, helping families.
So I guess to just synthesize everything you just said, it's really all about just understanding the role you're applying for, the needs, the true needs of the company, and then really just tailoring your experience as much as you can so that there is hopefully like a full alignment, right? And just be candid and transparent in terms of why you're looking. I think a lot of times it's easy to see big company on resume, not transferable to startups. But then if you dig deeper and you're like, hey, actually, I was maybe part of a startup within a big company, or maybe my team, like we said, was siloed and I'm itching to kind of break out of that to work for a fast growing company where I can have a lot more scope, wear multiple hats, then perhaps the receiving end would be a lot more understanding or empathetic to your situation. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. It's exactly right, Kristen. It's really exciting when you see people in career transition, like I was a designer and now I'm a programmer, or I was in marketing and now I'm an engineer. People who enjoyed that part of their career, but said, I'm going to take the time. And it can be scary to try and make that kind of transition, whether it's big companies to small companies, or, different career tracks, different sort of professions, if you like, to another profession. But if you're not excited about what you're doing and you want to try something new, you have to, like, you can't, you have to make sure there's acceptable risk, right? And for you and your family. But, I think it's easier than ever now to spend time, on your own time, sort of figuring out the transition before you bring that to your next job.
That makes sense. One thing that's really unique about your background, and actually, I think you're the first person on the podcast whose background before you became a founder was largely in marketing. A lot of founders either come from a straight business kind of background, MBA. A lot of them have more of a technical background, engineering, product. Yeah. So for you, at a certain point through Oracle, did you ever decide, I want to get out of marketing? Or if that didn't happen, what sort of marketing were you really doing? Or I guess specialize in what's your forte? And then just to kind of add one more question after that, just again, broad stroke, like how, in your opinion, have you seen like marketing professionals or the marketing landscape change since when you were kind of a rising professional in your career till 2022?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I started sort of on the tech track and doing an information system degree, and probably going down the more traditional role of like information design or information systems design and engineering, and ended up in a sort of IT role at that first job, and then transitioned into a technical sales role, like a sales consulting role at Oracle in New Zealand, and enjoyed that because it was a combination of the technology, demoing technology as part of a sales conversation. But for some reason, there was a creative element that wasn't that I wanted to have an outlet for in my career, and that really seemed like marketing was the place to go do that, where you could tell the story of a product, not just be building the product, and find the right way to get that in the customer's hands. And as part of moving to headquarters, I ended up in, it was sort of a transition along the way, like into a field marketing role, which was like a step removed from sales, but sort of informing countries and regions, like here's what's happening at headquarters, here's how we're distributing the materials. And then eventually more into a sort of core marketing communications or corporate marketing role, doing branding and messaging and direct mail and a lot of the other functions within marketing. So that's how I ended up having a pretty rounded perspective on a business at Oracle, going from sort of sales to field marketing to corporate marketing and branding and managing a lot of those functions. So it felt like a pretty natural transition to go in and run marketing functions and even business development or partnering functions as a facet of my sales training early on. And I think that basis, along with, because you're at early startups, there's lots of things to do, and getting exposure to the operational side as well across a few different companies now. And being a founder, you sort of are forced into that situation, like, well, someone has to figure this out. Who's going to do it? And, being forced into just figuring things out along the way, I think sort of led to this conclusion of like, hey, look, I think I'm ready to go start my own company. I have enough background to go and sort of justify that in my own mind, and not worry that I'm going to be, I know I'm going to learn more along the way, but feel confident in taking that on.
I think marketing in a general sense has a lot of different domains that are overlapping, right? For some companies, you could do a bit of sales, bit of partnerships, bit of business development. You tie that in with marketing, then it gives you almost like a founder 101 kit where if you ever decide to start your own company, you have a lot of the understanding experience in a lot of different domains, perhaps that can help you kind of ramp up and avoid just mistakes or accidents happening for a small startup. And it sounds like with your experience and all the accumulation of skills that you have developed up until that point, it seemed like it really helped you gain confidence and gain maybe the necessary skill sets or a lot of it to help you kind of pave the way or trailblaze once you decide to become a founder. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely right. I think just that combination of experiences is what led me to this sort of conclusion that, that at some point, like, yeah, you should take this on and put yourself in the pressure seat, I guess. Mm-hmm. You asked another interesting question about the evolution of marketing, and I think probably the one that sticks out to me is sort of the rise of the growth hacker. In the last, I guess maybe, I don't know, 5 to 10 years and the evolution of the title of CMO and what that has come to represent. So on the growth hacker side, it means, someone who is sort of spans marketing and product, I think, and is looking at that probably first half of the funnel or the customer experience and saying, how do we get someone's attention? How do we get them to try our product? How do we make sure that that's a good product experience? And, at some point get them to the paywall and make a decision. That has sort of become a domain of the growth hacker. Mm-hmm. And that can be tricky for a lot of organizations that are typically like, here's a role for marketing, here's a role for product management, here's a role for engineering, and have this growth marketer that spans at least those three, if not further down the funnel. So I think that's really exciting, but I think it's still, even for our organization today, it's a little tricky to say, well, who does that person report to? What are their responsibilities? Where does that end and finish? And I know, companies tend to either say, okay, well, that's a shared responsibility, or we're going to create a holistic team that runs growth experiments and has the ability to span those functions. I don't know if there's a right answer, but it's a really interesting evolution. And I think it's just caused by being user-centered and saying, none of these domains are separate from the user's point of view. They don't care. They just want to solve a problem. So how do you mirror that in your organization and actually solve the problem for them?
I love that. And pardon me from just talking a lot about marketing. I personally love marketing and media, and I find it fascinating. And as a recruiting professional who's been doing this for a long time, I completely agree. The term, the vertical growth, is a fairly new one, and it can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different companies. I have personally seen, and we've also personally recruited for companies looking for a growth manager, more on the product or the engineering side, and then a lot of companies making the distinction and wanting a growth marketing manager, maybe a little bit less of the product, less of the engineering. But it seems like when it comes to growth marketing / acquisition manager / performance manager, like all of those are interchangeable. It seems like the biggest skills that companies crave or assume that these professionals have are a lot of within the digital acquisition space. So it's like a lot of paid search, paid social. If they've done an affiliate or SEO, SEM, that's great. Is that kind of aligned to your definition of growth marketing today? Or maybe perhaps there's no right or wrong answer, like you alluded to earlier?
Yeah, that feels honestly a little bit constrained. I think I would bound that by what we call performance marketing, right? Is maybe just top of the funnel, SEO, paid UA. And I think if that's okay if you're big enough and you can have people just in those roles who are really, and I've had organizations where we built those teams before, and it's been great. Hey, you manage a couple of channels, those channels inside out, you're monitoring, things and making sure that there is performance in those channels, and running lots of sort of experiments in terms of creative performance, and making sure that those back out. But I think as you think about growth marketing, you want to think a little more broadly across that customer experience.
I see.
Yeah, cool. For me personally, I think there's merits to both, obviously, but I tend to think of it a little more broadly. Or we do.
I appreciate that. It's definitely food for thought, and perhaps maybe it's going to be something that continues to be dynamic and evolve over time. But 2 more things on marketing, if you can allow me. So number 1, will there be a resurgence, in your opinion, with like ads in billboards, TVs, radio. And my second question to you is, what are your honest thoughts on TikTok?
Well, I can answer TikTok because I'm not a user and I've sort of purposely avoided it. I waste enough time on Instagram as it is. I think there are pros and cons to TikTok. I think their algorithm is amazing. I think the way that they measure facial reactions to things and build it into their algorithm is both genius, maybe evil genius.
So for those that are unfamiliar with what you're alluding to, can you explain?
Yeah. So apparently, TikTok is able to look at your facial expressions as you're browsing their stream and convert those expressions into their algorithm, or that their algorithm understands whether you're happy or sad, or what kind of reaction you're having to the thing that you're viewing right now. And then obviously feeds you more of the same things that make you happy, or it could be sad, or some combination that they figured out is here's what combination of things to show you. And I think it's genius, but also potentially quite evil. Evil genius, maybe. I don't know if it can be used for good. Probably can. Could it be used for bad? Yes. Could it be used to manipulate you? Absolutely. Especially as we're all looking for entertainment, and dopamine, I think, is the operative part. That we all react positively to dopamine. So I think, yeah, there's something really fascinating about that technology. But I'm not a user, so I can't really speak from a point of view of being intensely involved in it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I know a lot of founders are experimenting with it. A lot of founders understand the importance of social, depending on your business and depending on what market you're in. So I would just always love to kind of ask and hear your thoughts. Perfect. Well, look, I think there's one part of your background, specifically investing in startups, where you can have a whole podcast on just about that. But for folks that are interested in the investing game and the startup game, without going too much in detail, would you be able to share maybe like one tip or one lesson learned that you take with you, or perhaps a criteria that you utilize to analyze your investment opportunities before you pull the trigger? What is one or a couple things, major takeaways from that experience that you'd like to share to the audience?
I think this is probably universally true for most investors at any part of the spectrum, is that investors tend to invest in things that they personally care about, or have some context for, or know about, or agree with the problem that you're solving. And I think you want that to be true. You have to care about it. And so without some connection to it, even if you think maybe this is what separates angel investors from institutional investors, is that they can separate those things and say, look, I don't know about this, and I maybe personally don't care about this, but I think this is a fantastic innovation and we have to invest in it. And let me make sure that everything else lines up. For an angel investor like me, who's investing in early stage companies, it's usually around the people and my relationship to the thing that they're working on. Do I know about it? Can I be helpful? Do I care about it? Fundamentally, do I believe that thing needs to exist in the world because I also want it to? So I think you have to sort of look at those two things and say, is this an investment, or is this something that I care about, or is it both? If you can get both, great. I think that's the best possible for an early stage investor, at least. And then still go through all the other checklists of questions, but having a personal connection to it and caring about it, probably the most important thing.
What are your favorite themes or spaces that you like to invest into, or you care about, in case we're curious?
Yeah, I think I have historically invested in sort of pure technology plays that usually related to something that I'm either trying to solve or had thought about and maybe considered starting my own thing, or had experience with in a former part of my career. And now I see someone solving for it. And so I'm pretty hardcore into technology investments, mostly because, I feel like I have the most context for that, being in that industry for a couple of decades.
Yeah. So I guess invest into what you know or what you like or what you're passionate about. I think it's an adage that a lot of founders and investors preach, and it's certainly true, right? You don't want to invest in something you have no idea about, have no context. So I appreciate you sharing. All right. So let's fast forward and just talk about your current company. So if you can, would you one more time just share, what does Trustworthy do? And how did you guys start? Like, what What was the inspiration? Was it you and a co-founder? Was it you in the beginning? What was it like raising your first, seed round? Just would love to kind of get some sort of context of the early days.
Yeah. Well, like any pitch, I guess I'll start with the problem. I think we realized for ourselves, and were inspired initially by our own lives and our own families and partners and parents and children, that we realized that we had this increasingly urgent problem around our family information. And particularly this notion of household equity, meaning not everyone knew where the information was or what was happening across the household, and that things have become so complex that there's this normal bifurcation of responsibility across households, that in most families, one side manages one set of things and another side manages another set of things. Mm-hmm. And traditionally that's been sort of around finance, where the person who earned the most money or who had a background in finance tended to manage the household finances, but now it's sort of exploded across all categories of information. We wanted to have better access and utility and transport from our information, but we also wanted to know that if something were to happen to us, that our families would know where the treasure map was to everything. And as we talked to more and more people, we realized it wasn't just us, that we're so deep in the information age now, it's not surprising that there's a lot of information to manage, and that's increasing, and it's accelerated through the pandemic as digital transformation has really taken hold. And that people were not just thinking about one category of information, they were thinking about multiple categories of information and how they could organize that and have access and utility from it, and give other people in their lives, their loved ones, and by extension, other people they trust, their trusted professionals like accountants and wealth advisors and estate planning attorneys and insurance brokers and others, some level of access to their information. And we ended up looking at what they were doing today and doing quite a lot of research and realizing that they'd all cobbled together some form of do-it-yourself system, whether they were using analog tools or digital tools. And then those systems all kind of suffered from the same set of problems that we thought software could help address. Those problems were, if you consider like files and folders and filing cabinets and fire safes on the analog side, and all the digital sort of tools like Google Drive and Excel and Dropbox and Evernote, those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. They all started with a blank page, right? So there's nothing to guide you or tell you where to start. They all relied on you to keep those systems up to date as things changed. There was no help or maintenance or connection to the data. They all were what we think of as dumb containers that you would put information in and maybe share it, but there was no information. The systems didn't know anything about the information. They couldn't operate on it and offer recommendations or help optimize your situation. And the last big one, surprisingly, was temporality. So if I create a Google Sheet and say, hey, Preston, here's all the important passwords that you might need for my systems. But I don't want you to have that today. I only want you to have that if something bad happens to me. Mm-hmm. That there's no way to do that in Google Sheets. I can either share it absolutely or not share it, or not share half of it, but not share the rest. So temporality was a big element for a lot of the systems, where you might want someone to know that it exists and have them be able to log in but not see anything. But then if something did happen to you, they could unlock it and have all the access that you wanted them to have. So those are the big ones. And we ended up building something to address all of that and more. And we call that the family operating system, which most families use to keep track of their family IDs, their money, property, passwords, insurances, taxes, legal documents, obviously a big one, their emergency plans, and then something called the family archive, which is kind of the emotional assets of the family. Could be photos or videos or recipes or traditions or stories or really anything that fits in that category of legacy that you want to pass on. And that's just what we have today. We've learned that people want more. There's more stuff that they want. There's more categories they want us to cover. But that's where we started. You had a lot of other questions in there about the origins of the company, but yep. So I'll try and cover that. We started with a co-founder, Dan McCool, who's our head of product, and we worked together at our former company, and then which we sold to Microsoft, and then worked at Microsoft together for quite a while. We decided to build a completely distributed company because he wanted to move back east to be near his family. He has 3 little ones, and obviously having childcare options. And we'd done this before the pandemic, so feel very lucky in sort of setting our intention and then of building a distributed company, and then sort of having that be forced on everyone because of COVID didn't feel like a big deal to us. But we'd said, hey, it doesn't make sense just to have a talent pool in the Bay Area. That's really expensive. We don't want to have an expensive lease in somewhere in San Francisco or in the Bay. Let's not do that. And we've been really inspired by companies like 37 Signals, which I think Column Safe Basecamp now, who've done that and had employees in 45 or more different countries, and say, great, let's try that. Let's try a global talent pool and see what that yields. That will be great for diversity of thought anyway. Let's embrace that. So that was part of our origins. We had started raising sort of in March 2020 and building a very, very early MVP. And we're optimistic because of the raise environment at the time that we'd raise money in a couple of months, if not sooner. And then COVID hit. And it ended up taking 6 months to get the first sort of couple of million in the door, and probably from a different set of investors than we had thought. So we had thought, like, let's look for pre-seed and seed investors, and everyone was a bit skittish. We ended up really getting started with some incredible angel investors, which I'm really glad about in retrospect, because we now have over, a network of 65 amazing angel investors that we can rely on to get introductions to almost anyone. So it was a lot more legwork and a lot more pitching for us, and talking to ones or twos or maybe a dozen angel investors at a time, but absolutely paid dividends in terms of our ability to make connections to people. We multiplied our network by 65 times through those really impressive folks, right, who had amazing networks of their own. Now, maybe not everyone has time to do that. That was kind of forced on us because of the pandemic, but I'm glad it was. It's a really interesting provocation for anyone raising early money to think about. Hey, if you could go to one person and get all the money that you needed for your pre-seed or seed round, sure, that's going to save you a bunch of time and let you focus on your product and company. But maybe there's a trade-off on the other side of that, and consider raising less money from a lot more people.
Was your co-founder, did he also have a technical background?
Somewhat of a technical background. I think we both have, dallied with coding in our career, but are not engineers today and haven't, knew going in that the two of us would need to find a solid engineer, head of engineering / technical officer. That was a weakness for us, right? That in pitching to anyone, that they're like, great, who's going to build this amazing vision? I think we were fortunate that we were able to raise money with our pitch deck and the story of why this was necessary and the research that we've done, and them hearing from customers and obviously relating it to themselves in their own lives is. I think that's one advantage that almost every investor that we have talked to is, achieved some level of success and has some informational complexity in their lives and could relate to this problem. And they've either built a system for themselves and realized what it took to do that, or are lacking a system and want to use Trustworthy for their own families. So they had some personal connection to it.
I appreciate you sharing. I think the reality of raising funds, early stage, people can get the feeling, especially if they don't know too much about how it works, or all they know about tech is, the movies or TV shows or the articles written about it. And it's just easy to assume that just money flies like that into your bank account very easily. And in fact, the reality is a lot of work goes behind just trying to get those initial conversations going, let alone the initial, $500,000, couple mil into the bank. So I really appreciate you sharing and just being honest about that. Trustworthy, that's super interesting. And I loved how you coined the family operating system, FOS. I think that's really cool. So is the biggest use case for your consumers ones that are like, hey, we have tons of things, categories and data points that we can optimize running our house, or the estate planning part of it? What happens, God forbid, if something horrible happens? Or is it kind of an even split of both? And it's interesting because, looking at households and how you operate households is very similar to a company, right? So many moving pieces, a lot of things going in, a lot of things going out, and then passwords and safes and all that just can add a whole extra level of complexity to it. So I'm just curious to where the company is right now. Is it kind of an even split, or are you seeing a stronger demand on one or the other?
Yeah, it's pretty 50-50 in terms of the use cases. But the thing you just did there was really telling, especially me coming from this corporate background at Oracle, where we had thousands and thousands of systems to manage company information. A CRM for customers, front office, back office, marketing, on and on and on. And consumers really have nothing, right? There's no system of record to help them run their families and their family business. And I mean, obviously, the business of family is not a family business. Many of our members do also have family businesses, which is a whole nother domain of complexity for them. And it's actually one of the biggest new categories that they've asked us for. Coming back to those use cases, though, I think we see people equally split between I want access and utility. I'm looking for the VIN number for my car. Obviously, that's a huge combination of letters and numbers that I'm never going to remember. Where is it when I need it? I want my partner's social security number or my kid's social security number. I want the healthcare information. I'm at Walgreens, I'm at the pharmacy. In all those moments of life when you need a piece of information and it exists somewhere, you just don't know where it is right now. And having it on your device, on your phone, right in front of you is so empowering. And that's half of the use case of Trustworthy, is having all of that important information when you need it available to you, and the ability to get it where it needs to go quickly and securely, more securely than most people are using today. The other side of it absolutely was true as well, where, if you love your family, which invariably everyone does, you want to know that they'll be taken care of if you're not around or something happens to you, or even if you're debilitated in some way, that your loved ones know where to go to get the important information. We didn't want to build a system just about if something bad happens. And because we saw this sort of whole life use case, we wanted to build a system for families for their whole lives. And frankly, we aspire to be a multi-generational system and we see that happening in Trustworthy today, where, grandparents have their own system, parents have their system, and then children are part of those systems, and that evolves as they become adult children and have their own families. And that we see the systems being inherited by each generation as transitions happen. Transitions is our PC term for passing away, because no one likes to think about it. But the reality is, life is finite, and at some point that's going to become necessary. And we've heard all the horror stories of what happens when people aren't prepared and organized, and families spend months or years working through the information from their parents or grandparents or uncles or aunts or family members' households. And that's the last thing they want to be thinking about when they're grieving.
No, I love it. I love how it's applicable, not just to like the what if something bad happens, but like just to day to day. And then in the future, you can, also apply it to multi-generations. I think that's very, very smart, because if you were just the product just for estate planning, I mean, how would the marketing narrative sound? What would that look like? It's hard enough to market a product for something that you think a consumer needs now, let alone like something that you think they would need if something bad happens, right? Like what's the stickiness probability of that? I mean, it's probably...
Well, it's life insurance, right? That's the life insurance sale. Like, hey, your family, if you don't have enough assets to leave, then we're going to cover the bases with this insurance policy if something unplanned happens. I think there is obviously a strong use case for that.
Sure.
But we didn't want to just focus on that side of the equation, because we saw this, and felt this and had this in our own lives. Like, I need this piece of information to do something, whether it's something as simple as, getting a small check for the car, or I'm doing a refinance, right? I don't want to spend the whole weekend assembling this information to get this mortgage closed. We can help you assemble it once and keep it up to date. And then any future transaction you might need or piece of information you need, we want to make the transition of that, or the transport and delivery of that, seamless.
It's a much more palatable way of kind of like a backdoor upsell. It's like, hey, we can help you cover and organize your life today. By the way, if something else happens, we got you covered, right? I think that's great. How big is your team now?
Yeah, we're 20 people, probably growing to around 25 this year, and in this phase of the company. So a few more critical hires to make, and as we build out.
That's definitely a good number for someone that's navigating the ship. What is like your favorite channels of finding and recruiting talent? Because people who are listening in tech, they know that the competition for talent is hyper competitive. People who are not in tech I think, talent in general is competitive, right? But for a smaller company that's trying to go after the same talent, and you're battling the Facebook and Googles of the world sometimes for the same talent. How, like, what are some of your favorite methods to help you scale from, you and the co-founder to a team of 20 now?
Yeah, obviously, I'm trying to leverage our networks as much as possible. So our personal networks, our team members' networks, we pay bounties to team members if they help land a successful candidate, and leverage referrals as much as possible, obviously from our investor networks as well. Beyond that, we use services like AngelList, which seems to be particularly robust for early stage companies. And because we're a distributed company, and a diverse company, we use sort of specific networks like We Work Remotely, Girls Who Code, and sort of other more niche kind of network or places to find folks.
I love it. And it's really cool that you're able to share that you made the decision to make your company fully remote. It's certainly another ongoing discussion, a dynamic one in our industry at that. Do you ever see a future that you're going to ask folks to come into the office or somehow bounce back to a hybrid system, or everything's working out really great remotely?
It's, I think remote has its own set of challenges, especially where it's, it would be not, you could accelerate discussions if you were in person, sort of on the work side. And then on the social side, I think we embrace things like, coffee donut through Slack, where people connect for meetings that are not work related. And we're, constantly evolving our remote culture. We had always intended to bring the team together in person a couple of times a year, and the pandemic put a hold on that, but we were able to get a lot of the team together in Chicago this year for the first time in our history, which was amazing. Something we would love to keep doing, moving forward. Having just some FaceTime and playing this game of how tall are you really? Because it was a really fun game to play, because no one can tell how tall you are on Zoom. It sort of depends, like, is the camera pointing down or pointing up?
That's fun.
It was a fun game to play. And just having the sort of team bonding time and getting to hang out together was invaluable. So definitely something we'll continue.
What are some of the unique features of your company or X factors of your company that people should be aware of, especially if they think of maybe I vibe with Trustworthy and its story and its mission, and perhaps I'd love to apply one day?
Yeah, I mean, I think because we're still pretty early, that we've been able to keep a really high bar for the people who've joined, that they're personally connected to the mission in some way, that they have an amazing set of experiences and background that they're bringing to the table, and are not driven by ego. Like, I guess everyone's sort of equally humble, meaning equally willing to contribute and share and teach from their own experiences. I think the other element is that we knew we had to embrace diversity very early, that it's very difficult to solve later on if you don't solve it up front. And we're really proud of our 60% plus diversity quotient across the company, something we absolutely want to maintain as we grow.
I love that. I think it's easy to say you're making diversity a priority, but then it's actually a lot more difficult to execute once you become too big. And that's a problem that we're seeing in our industry. A lot of founders are they're putting a narrative out saying that they're recruiting based on diversity only, but then they're like, oh wait, maybe when they became 100, 200, 500, maybe we should start thinking about diversity. And it's very difficult to do, because then your cultures, everything's just entrenched, right? But when you're a smaller company, that's the time to do it. And so I love the fact that you're prioritizing it. And I think that's definitely something that a lot of other smaller startups and founders or companies of similar stages should follow suit.
I think it's right. It's very hard for people to feel like they belong if you're trying to solve it later on, right? If they're landing in a company that's not diverse and have the sort of beginnings of the diversity efforts, they arrive and they're like, I don't feel like I belong here because I'm the only one of me, and they leave, right? It's not a good equation. I've certainly worked at companies before where that was a big factor. They had massive initiatives to increase diversity. They were successful in getting the candidates in, but they were not successful in keeping them.
So for someone that walked away from Oracle feeling like you were too far removed from the action, and now you're running and building Trustworthy, what does your day-to-day look like as a CEO and founder? Are you really hands-on with putting out the fires? are you more focused on marketing, doing a little bit of everything, in case people are curious what life's like as a founder?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed a lot in the last couple of years, and probably most noticeably since we raised our Series A in March of this year, where we've had the ability to hire sort of amazing leaders in important functional areas, particularly in business development and marketing, and even in DevSecOps and other parts where, we've been playing a lot of different roles and wearing a lot of different hats, and now have amazing leaders in each of those spaces to sort of take some of the load off. So whereas I might have been doing some marketing and business development and operations before, now it's more focused on operational excellence and efficiency, as well as, sort of staying in touch with and helping manage or really get out of the way of and enable our function leaders in each of those areas, making sure they have what they need to go and be effective. But in the last, 12 months, it would have been like, hey, I'm doing a little part of all of those roles at various points in the company, as well as, staying on top of or staying in touch with the product and seeing how that's evolving. It's very rewarding, even, a couple of years in, to have gotten from 2 people to 20 people and no product to a product that every day in Slack, we see people purchasing our product through the App Store, through Stripe, and we're just kind of like, wow, people are giving us money for this amazing product that we built that wasn't happening 2 years ago. It still strikes me as somewhat odd and amazing and beautiful, and like a big part of why we're doing this is sort of validation of our ideas, right? And that we're able to help families be more organized and prepared.
I love it. For people who are listening, who love marketing, who are marketing professionals, who maybe one day hope to follow in your footsteps to start or build a software of their own, can you say now, looking retrospectively in your career and what you've done so far at Trustworthy, that having a background in marketing certainly played a key role in helping you start Trustworthy, getting a product created and scaling out a team?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can come into being a founder and potentially a CEO with any kind of background, that everyone brings something different to the role, right? I think what helps is maybe having partners who bring something else and complement you nicely if you're looking for that kind of situation where you want to co-found. And frankly, it just makes life easier to have someone like that. So whether it's marketing or sales or engineering, I think whatever you bring is going to influence your perspective in coming to starting a company. So I wouldn't be constrained. Don't be constrained by your background, I guess, is my message, because as a founder, you're going to be forced into learning a lot of new things anyway. But, be confident that what you are bringing to the table is valuable, and it might be more or less valuable at different stages of the company, but things progress so rapidly in companies and in what you're building today that there's probably not going to be a period where whatever background you have isn't useful in some capacity.
I love it. And so for people who are listening, who are in a similar situation, even myself, when I heard you describing what Trustworthy, the mission and what the product actually does, I'm like, it just made me think of all the other apps I'm using, my closet, my bookshelf, where I'm holding sensitive or important information. I'm like, man, maybe I can use something like this, and it totally resonates. So if someone they just got excited from this conversation, they want to try you, where can they find this app? How much is it? Is it a one-time payment up front? Is there a monthly subscription beyond that? Like, how does that look like?
Yeah, you can go to trustworthy.com, just as it sounds, and you can sign up. You can also go to the App Store and download our iOS app. There's a 14-day free trial. You don't need to enter a credit card. It's completely free to try and sort of see if the family operating system is a fit for your family. We also offer a free onboarding with one of our experts, and we would definitely encourage that. If you have questions or you want to discover more features or find out the best way to customize the family operating system for your family, that's completely free. And you can schedule it through the site or through our intercom or through one of the emails that you're going to get once you sign up. Beyond the free trial, you can certainly subscribe. We don't have monthly subscriptions. We only have annual subscriptions, and the subscriptions start at $20 a month paid annually, so $240 a year. But if you sign up in the first sort of 24 hours, or if you pay in the first 24 hours of your trial, we offer a 20% discount. So that's a pretty easy way to get a discount. If you sort of onboard in that first day and say, yeah, this is something I want to use, we offer a meaningful discount there. And of course, we offer a 30-day money back guarantee if you find out within that first month that it's not a fit for your family. So that's really the easiest way to get started. Definitely download the app because we have this really great intelligent scanner that can help and scan a lot of your documents if you want to do that. So you get something in the mail and like, I don't know where to put this, quickly scan it, it goes right into Trustworthy. And yeah, we also offer a really great price point for our heroes, our first responders. This is something that obviously occurred to us during the pandemic for EMTs, police, firemen, doctors, nurses, teachers, all the professions that were really taxed and working hard during the pandemic. We wanted to do something for that audience. We offer 50% off our paid plans if you're part of that category.
Amazing. As you look into the future, as your team gradually scales over time, if people are like, you know what, I would love to work with Nat one day, I would love to join the Trustworthy team, what are some types of positions you think you might be hiring for into the future if people are curious?
Yeah, well, we're always looking for engineers and mobile engineers. I think that's probably a truism of every tech company these days. We're looking for folks who want to be Trustworthy certified experts, meaning I want to go through Trustworthy's certification program and become a certified expert so that I can help my clients get better organized and prepared. And so you might be an insurance broker or just a sort of organization professional who wants to help their clients with that. That's something you can do. We're hiring in product and marketing right now as well, and we'll expect that to grow as we continue.
All right. So, and then they can go to your website to apply if they wanted to apply.
Yeah, they can just go to the career section on our website at trustworthy.com.
Perfect. So Nat, I know that we're coming to a close here, but we always like to end each conversation with one more question. So for someone that has just an amazing career, starting a business before, now you're building out Trustworthy, as a leader, as a founder, what is one advice, one tip that you want to share with the audience in case that they want to follow suit?
I think advice has been given a lot. It's certainly relevant. I think it's relevant advice it's related to risk. There is some personal risk involved in early companies. Everyone wants to be a Mark Zuckerberg and have a fantastic outcome, but the reality is that just doesn't happen for every company. In fact, the odds are against you. So I think evaluate the risk, and that risk tends to be much lower earlier in life. That if you're deciding whether to join a large company or a startup or make your own startup, that doing that earlier in life makes a ton of sense, right? You have a smaller set of needs and your risk tolerance is much higher. So you can try one or two or maybe even three different ventures in that phase of your life without much downside. Meaning, you're probably trading up tens of thousands of dollars in a salary or in your compensation from working for a big company for pursuing your own ideas and passions and your own idea and your own thing that you feel like has to exist in the world. If you have the luxury of choosing, choose to do that earlier in life. If not, just understand that there is some risk and that you and your family are okay with taking that risk on. Is sort of right-sizing your risk exposure, I think, is what I'm saying, for your phase of life and your stage of family. Yeah, I'll end with that.
I love it. And it's very, very true. You have lower obligations and lower responsibilities, higher chances of making mistakes and failing. And so if you have an idea, just go for it. And you heard it from the founder and CEO of Trustworthy, and I really appreciate you for that advice. But Nat, I just want to thank you again. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Hope you got something from it too. But personally for me, it was really inspiring to hear the story of someone who came all the way from New Zealand, who worked in the equivalent of the IRS there, to then pivoting his career into marketing and then starting other startups, working at big companies, working at small companies, investing in companies, now building your own. I mean, in tech, you probably did it all. But to see you now and to being the founder and creator of the family operating system, I think is really cool. It's very inspirational, especially for the team of 20 that you're able to build completely distributed. And I think a lot of the principles that you're instituting and implementing in your company, for example, prioritizing diversity and really making sure that you select the first hires very, very carefully, setting that right bar for subsequent hires down the line, I think should certainly be a role model for a lot of other founders and companies who are tuning in too. So I personally am excited about your product. I think it's one that I personally can use. I might have to go and check it out after this podcast. And I hope that if you're listening and you feel the same way, I encourage all of you to check it out too. And one more thing, if people ever want to reach out to you, perhaps it's to apply to Trustworthy, to get some advice, to get advice, whether it's a career in tech, investing, or being a founder, where can they find you?
Yeah, probably the easiest way to get a hold of me is just email help@trustworthy.com, and your email will find, just send it to Nat and it'll find its way to me, and I'll be happy to respond.
Perfect. Yeah, feel free to reach out to him. But again, just very, very excited for you and the team, and excited to see what you will do moving forward, especially as you foray into the multi-generational aspect of evolving your product. So thank you so much again. We will certainly keep in touch, and excited to see what you and the team will do, especially navigating this landscape that we all find ourselves in. But much respect and kudos and best of wishes of success to you and your team, and looking forward to seeing what will happen.
Thanks, Preston. Really love all your great questions. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this time together.
Perfect, Nat. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.